3. Philip Thigo in the building, just talking to us a little bit about AI. And we had promised to talk about the future of money, but most close to my heart and every other Kenyan's heart is elections. Now, this year alone, we have 60 elections across the world, with over 15 in Africa, and world superpowers, US and Russia, are definitely, and also the UK, are going to have their elections this year. AI is here. Will we experience AI, or are we bound to have a change in the elections when it comes to matters AI? Talk to us a little bit about what you think about it, either speculative or with actual facts, because I know with you, it can go both ways.
And I'll talk with actual facts, of course. So there's, from, of course, November of 2022, and that is why I think all of us now understand artificial intelligence, especially with ChatGPT. There's a new version of artificial intelligence that actually emerged. Everybody talks about AI. Some of us now talk about generative artificial intelligence, right? So the previous one, remember, I said artificial intelligence is just machines being able to sort of do functions that humans can do. Generative AI, it means that artificial intelligence has now transformed to be able to generate its own thoughts, its own thinking.
So self-improving.
Exactly, self-actuating artificial intelligence. Can make predictions, can create new content. So when you talk about elections, we're actually talking about more or less generative artificial intelligence. And it's already here. In the US elections, we know this week, for example, in the robocalls, these automated calls, because the US people still make calls. AI is making calls in the voice of President Biden. Right? And it's not President Biden calling. It's one of the super PACs that is using his voice to call people to misinform, disinform. So it's already happening.
So you're saying the biggest war we are just about to face is misinformation?
Misinformation, disinformation, deep fakes. So deep fakes are the ones that you see here, and I'm sure you saw it. President Obama's image with his mouth moving as if he's saying some things in his voice. So that's a deep fake. That is you talking, but is really not you. Somebody has used artificial intelligence to use your voice, manipulated an image as if you're the one communicating. So that's already happening.
Is it being used properly, like for the right cause? Because maybe Philip is busy, he needs to say a lot of things, and then on the other hand, I can just prompt, and then it just sends like voice notes to a couple of people. Maybe I had a meeting with them and I was supposed to give feedback. Ni prompt pale.
And that's the point, right? So when I say misinformation, disinformation, deepfakes, by that very nature, is being misused.
Okay.
And so because it's easy to do that now, and because technology is ubiquitous, right? So technology is everywhere. The minute I send that and I blast that, by the time you catch it, the harm has been done. Because we know the first instance of accessing that video, even if somebody issues a rejoinder or somebody says this is fake news, it's already gone in the population.
There's one thing that's going to be tampered with, and that's trust.
Yes.
So, and it's in every relationship, even at home, with your kids, with whoever. Now it's governments and its citizens. How best can any government get to handle its the public when it comes to these moments where we're looking at disinformation and misinformation? Just talk to us about that.
Now, if you think about, and this is the point, right? And you asked me about elections. Elections is not an event, right? Elections is a cycle.
But in Kenya, it looks like, you know, leo ukikuja vizuri, kesho tunakuweka ndani.
It's a mindset, right? And I keep on telling people that every elections is a cycle. So trust is not earned in a moment. Trust is earned over time. So any government that wants to build trust with its citizen needs to do it over time. Because when it comes to an election event and there's already polarization and sort of a proliferation of misinformation, it's very hard for you to begin to gain and earn trust. So the idea now is that how do you, in the era of diminished trust, even deploy these tools, because these tools have dualities, right? So you can still use artificial intelligence, for example, to explain government policy.
Yeah. Now, talk to me a little bit about the control of it, regulation.
Oh wow!
I know we need an entire show, but best way forward in just like 2 or 3 statements. Regulation. Do you feel like we're going to get to a point where AI will be totally, completely regulated?
I do not think so, and I do not advocate for such. Because at the moment, artificial intelligence keeps changing so fast, and how we regulate is very linear. There's always a disconnect. So by the time, for example, you go through a regulatory cycle, artificial intelligence has changed. Or emerging technology has changed, right? So you regulate today and tomorrow it's something else. So the regulation is obsolete. The recommendation of what also I'm doing at the UN Secretary General's Advisory Board is to come up with sort of what we call soft regulations, which means you need some semblance of guardrails. And then voluntary commitments. Because remember, artificial intelligence is developed by companies. So they already know 3 years, 4 years out what they're going to do in the 3-4 years. So can you have some form of a self-regulation? Self-regulation for me, for example, is that how do you ensure that you have ethical concerns? Because we know AI has bias depending on how I design it. So can you
and people fear for their identity.
Exactly. Can you self-regulate there? Can you protect people's data so that you don't train artificial intelligence in a way that you're marginalizing a community? Is it inclusive? Because sometimes we've seen it also sometimes has gender bias, has racial bias. So how do you ensure that the data you're training artificial intelligence is inclusive? So those are things you can do self-regulation. Now, soft regulation means at some point governments have to have some form of control. And these are, I always say, is in terms of public good. So they need to protect the citizens from harm. Because we know AI, like these deep fakes, fake news, misinformation, disinformation.
I'm so worried because we would use videos as evidence in court, and definitely that might change with